This video is going to explain the transformations. We're going to talk about the vocabulary for transformations. There are 9 specific vocabulary words we want to talk about. The first one in particular is the term transformation. A transformation is a change made to a figure. A change made to a figure. Because you're transforming it. Transformations are changing. The next one is pre-image. The pre-image is actually your original figure. Your original figure. This is before, the figure before any transformation has occurred. Transformation has occurred. Now the thing about the pre-image is we're going to be dealing with figures, so we like to use triangles and rectangles and any type of figure that we can actually transform on a coordinate plane. So we're going to be having coordinates. Well, the pre-image coordinates are actually the domain. So if you remember back to functions, function notation, you have domain and range. So our coordinates of the pre-image are the domain. So we're going to have domain. If we have domain, then we're going to end up having range as well. So if the pre-image is the domain, the image will be the range. So the image is the actual transformed figure, because this is what we're changing. Transformed figure. So again, the coordinates of the image are the range. So if we talk about function notation with mapping rules, we will be talking about the domain and range, and we'll be able to get the domain from the range. If we're given the range, we'll be able to go backwards to get the domain, we'll be able to get the pre-image coordinates. So again, if it says you have the domain, you have the pre-image coordinates. If it says you have the range, you have the image coordinates. Now the image has to be said a very specific way. The pre-image is where we use the original letters like A, B, C. But the image, your image is always written from, if the pre-image is A, if it is labeled A, that's our pre-image. So then what we do when we transform it, it turns into what's called A prime. So it almost looks like an exponent of 1. That's not an exponent, but it is called A prime. We could do multiple transformations, so we might have one and then we have to transform it again and then again. So once we go past prime, we say A double prime, and we put 2 tick marks up here. We don't put a 2, we don't say A squared, this is pronounced prime. So all of these are pronounced as prime. So again, it might be prime, double prime, triple prime, and continuing on. So anytime you have an image, your A without any primes on it is actually your pre-image. This is the original letter, this is the original coordinate, and then you've transformed it. However many primes you have actually tells you how many transformations have occurred. The next word we're going to talk about is isometry. Now, isometry tells you that the pre-image, the definition of isometry is the pre-image and image are congruent. Now, what congruent means is that you have the same size and same shape. So the symbol for it, it has the equal sign, so that it's the same size. It's not bigger or smaller than the other. But then you have a squiggle on top of it. That actually is the similarity symbol, which means same shape. So we have both the same size and the same shape to make them congruent. So if you have transformed it and one's bigger than the other, then they are not isometric. So isometry, we can call it isometric. Figures might have isometry, but then the preimage and image are isometric. Now we're going to get into the actual types of transformations. There are 4 transformations we're going to be doing. Again, a transformation is saying that something has been done to the figure. There are 4 types of transformations. So if you're asked, what are the transformations? You have to say these down here. What is happening? First one we have is translation. Translation is sliding a figure without changing the size or shape. So translation, is just sliding it around. So it's not going to change the size or the shape, so they will be isometric. The next one we have is dilation. Again, this is pronounced dilation, not dilation. Dilation is changes the size of a figure. What that means is that the preimage to the image might get bigger than the preimage, or it might go smaller. So if they are changing the size, then they will not be isometric. Now, one thing about dilations is that they will always be centered at a point. And I will get into that, how to determine the center of your dilation. But normally, the center of dilation will be the origin, 0, 0. You can center it from a different coordinate, but that takes more to do than just the dilation. The next one we have is reflection. Reflection creates symmetry. In the coordinate plane. So if you remember anything, if you have seen the quadratics, if you have the axis of symmetry, it's the line that goes through the middle where you can reflect it over to the other side. It's a mirror image of each other. So reflections are basically just doing the axis of symmetry again and just reflecting over and mirroring it over to the other side. The last transformation that we're going to talk about is rotation. Rotation, or rotating, is when it turns a figure about a fixed point. This could also be around a fixed point, but it's when it rotates a figure about a fixed point. Now, just like in dilation, it has a center of dilation, rotations will have a center of rotation. That's that point that we're rotating around. What you have to do when you rotate anything in a coordinate plane is you have to make sure it goes counterclockwise. So if we have our point, wherever it happens to be, our figure, wherever it starts, has to go counterclockwise around that coordinate. And it's going to be the same distance away from that coordinate. So rotation goes counterclockwise. So if it says clockwise, you need to change it to become counterclockwise. The last word that we're going to talk about is composite transformations. Composite is when you actually do multiple transformations. That means that we can combine any of these 4. So composite transformation is multiple transformations done on a figure. And you can do two transformations would be considered a composite, but you could do 3, you could do all 4 of them. You could do a translation, then a dilation, then another translation, and that's considered a composite. You can do a reflection, reflection, reflection. It's still a composite. So anytime you do multiple transformations, that's considered a composite. But you still follow the same rules for any of the transformations. So I'm going to go back through. I'm going to highlight just the words. These are my vocabulary words: transformation, preimage, image, isometry. Translation is one of the transformations. Dilation is another. Reflection is the third. Rotation is the fourth. And then again, composite transformations is when we do multiple transformations on a figure. That is the vocabulary.